Welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week we have a conversation. Doug and I join to talk with a sitting college president or chancellor to talk about their role, their leadership, kind of how they got there. And in general, it's just a lighthearted opportunity to talk about leadership in a capacity on a Monday that is always positive and uplifting. And that's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom.
And the show, as always, is brought to you by Mainstay, which is the student engagement and retention platform that is dedicated to proving its efficacy through peer-reviewed research. It's best known for its work with Georgia State University to reduce summer melt and also to increase the retention of students. And you can find out more about Mainstay and learn about this research at mainstay.com.
And this show is also broadcast on the Innovating Together podcast, which is sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. So we're grateful for their support and sponsorship. But now, drum roll, very excited to bring to the stage our guest.
Right. And we're joined today by the Chancellor of the University of Illinois Chicago, Marie Lynn Miranda. Before taking that job middle of last year, she was provost at the University of Notre Dame, and before that at Rice University. So welcome, Chancellor. Great to see you.
Hey, good. It's good to see you both, Bridget and Doug.
We are super excited to chat with you. And I just, in general, was sharing with Doug that you are just a really refreshing chancellor. Like, you're just a very human. And that sounds very weird, but I, as someone who's worked with more than 50 college presidents and chancellors, that's you have a disarmingly human quality about you that you, in every conversation, very empathetic. And also the fact that you're a beekeeper. It's very interesting. It's very unique.
So those are correlated traits, right?
But it's been such a pleasure getting to know you with the University Innovation Alliance. And so I'm so excited to bring you on and for other folks to get to know you, because I think you have a different approach to leadership that I've picked up, and I'm excited for you to be able to just give folks a little bit of a taste.
Yeah, well, you're always very kind, Bridget. I appreciate those words, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show with the two of you. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, so we want to just start off with your leadership style, and I mean, if you also want to talk about how it is you got to become Chancellor of UIC, I find that Notre Dame is that is an unusual step along the journey, I think, and I just am very interested. Plus, your research background is very intriguing. But I just in general want to know about your leadership style, and if there's a person or experience that most informed who you are as a leader.
Yeah, well, there are all of those various assessment things that people do to figure out, are you this kind of leader or that kind of leader? And I'm pretty certain, no matter what assessment you subjected me to, I would come out as an analytical, values-driven servant leader. Those are the three things that have characterized the approach that I've taken for a long time. You have to forgive me, I have this cough that doesn't seem to want to go away. Anyway, so servant leader, I think that, and I'm most interested in leadership because of what you can make possible for the people in your community if you lead an organization well. And by that, I mean what we can make possible for our faculty and staff, and of course, most importantly, what we can make possible for our students, but also at a university like University of Illinois Chicago, which is right in the heart of the city of Chicago, what we can make possible for the many communities that surround us and actually across the entire city that we engage with. So that's a really important part of UIC's mission that is a little bit differentiating from some universities. There are some universities that share that, but that's important to us as well. And I think you also asked who are leaders that I've looked to. So, excuse me, I've had an opportunity to watch a lot of really incredible people as they lead. I spent 21 years on the faculty at Duke, and then I became a dean at the University of Michigan. And when Mary Sue Coleman was the president there, she was an incredible leader to witness as someone who was new to academic leadership. I'd been leading a big research group for a long time, but for someone who is new to academic leadership, having Mary Sue Coleman as the president of the university, that was, I learned a lot from her, and I actually continue to learn a lot from her. She's sort of my unofficial executive coach, which is really helpful to be able to call someone with that level of experience. But I'm maybe a little bit more naturally introverted than extroverted. I've learned extroversion skills to be able to do the jobs that I've had. But one of the products of that kind of natural tendency to be a little bit more introverted is I'm observing people all the time, no matter where I am, whether I'm in the grocery store, I'm at the gym, or whether I'm at a higher education conference, or at faculty senate, etc. So I'm always trying to observe people, and I think you can learn things about leadership from everybody that you're interacting with. There are all kinds of, people are leading and following and walking alongside in almost every moment of their lives. And so if you're careful in the way that you pay attention, you can learn a lot every day, wherever you are. And then I guess the third thing I would say is that I really love reading. I still do a lot of reading. In addition to all of the reading that we all have to do for these jobs, I try to end my day not on a screen. It's good for our brains. It's good for a whole lot of things to still read. And I actually read tactile books rather than on a screen. And I read a lot of biographies and both autobiographies and biographies of people who've had, have had really interesting lives. So I just finished the book that Tony Fauci wrote about his life. It's called On Call, about his life starting early on, growing up in his family all the way through medical school and his time at the NIH and all the things that he's been involved in. And, and you can, when you're reading people's biographies and autobiographies, you can see, you can almost hear in that things they wish they had done a little bit differently, things that they're really happy that they did in that particular way. And you can start drawing parallels to the kinds of work and the kinds of questions that you yourself have to face. So
I feel like you've answered a lot there. That's super helpful and insightful. So, yeah, that's
yeah. I was thinking that you answered about 4 of the questions we're asked. We could probably wrap right now and just I'm actually, so when you were describing the traits that how does the analytical piece factor in to your day-to-day work particularly?
Yeah, so my faculty appointments at UIC are in the Department of Pediatrics and in the Department of Mathematics, Statistics, and Computer Science. And I'm a highly quantitative scientist. All my work has been highly quantitative. And it's pretty helpful when you run, excuse me, it's pretty helpful when you run a university if you have, some facilities with some facility with numbers and with analysis, and it helps you there's so much data that's relevant, and it's easy to get buried in data and to get frozen in the middle of all that data because there's so much coming at you and you don't quite know what to do with all of it. And having analytical skills, you spend a lot of time figuring out how to distill information out of data. So we have lots of data coming at us. The trick is, what's the information and what's the knowledge and all of that data that's coming at us. And one of the things that I talk about all the time is, yes, I'm a data-driven decision maker, but it's also the case that you look at what information you can glean from all of the data, but then you have to look at what are the values of my institution, and here's the outcome from the analysis. And there are some things that you're going to do that, the outcome from the analysis might not support, but you say as a value, that's something we have to do. And then there are other things, like, so for example, when people are doing budgets, there are, people think, oh, budgets are all about numbers, but budgets are actually all about values, right? So budgeting is, mostly addition, some subtraction, and every now and then you do some multiplication. It's not like the mathematics of it isn't particularly complicated. What's complicated is, how do all of these budget decisions we made, how do they match up with the values and priorities that we've espoused for the university? So I think I bring my analytical brain to the table a lot in almost all the decision making, but I try never to let my analytical brain silence the values of this institution.
So it's interesting to hear that perspective of you as a leader, because what I've observed is you came into an institution that had been going through a lot of transition, just on the heels of COVID, very difficult time, just generally in higher ed. And your leadership style has been a bit of a salve for the, I think, the morale of the institution. You've been very, I think, focused on ensuring that people actually feel good in their roles in a way that I think others, that sometimes we neglect that and don't think it was as serious or as important, but it is actually the thing that matters. And I'm just curious about, you have this analytical perspective, but yet, again, back to the humanity, you really have balanced out, in my observation, the centering of the needs of the very human needs of inspiring people. And I'm just curious about how that's a hard that's hard to navigate, I think, for many leaders. They will revert to a command and control style of leadership and just try and move the institution forward. But I find that you have really threaded that needle in a way that I find interesting. And I'm just wondering, are there any things that have helped you in that journey? If you were to give advice to others who are trying to navigate the morale and making the right decisions?
Yeah. Well, again, Bridget, you are always so very kind to me. I think it's very helpful in these jobs to be curious, and in that curiosity to try to get from others how they're thinking about an issue, a situation, an opportunity, whatever the case might be. And if you're in the habit of asking a lot of questions, and I'm a deeply curious person. I love learning about all kinds of different things. It's one of the greatest things about being a chancellor, that you can go learn about every single nook and cranny of the university, and nobody can tell you that's not in your purview, because it's all in your purview. So you get to learn about everything. It's so cool. But when you're going and you're exploring all these areas, and you physically go to where people work and their labs or their classrooms or the things that they're doing out in the community, and you're physically going to them. You're not doing it over Zoom. You're really physically present with them, and you're asking them questions. And if it comes from a sincere place, I think that we always talk about dogs and babies are really good at sensing when there's sincerity. I think most human beings are good at sensing when there's sincerity in what you're doing. What I would say about when I arrived here is that it was July 2023 when I started. I spent a lot of time here on campus in the 6 months preceding that, trying to get to know. I did a deep dive with every single one of our colleges, with every single one of our vice chancellor areas, et cetera. So there was a deep dive there. So people knew even before I arrived that I wanted to hear from them. And during those deep dives, I posed some questions in advance, and then they could organize however they wanted to answer the questions and who was going to be presenting. They had the freedom, and they could use their creativity to provide me. And they could, if they had time, they could answer other questions that they thought I should have asked, right? So it started off that way. But one of the things that I realized when I got here is, even though it was 2023, we were still coming out of COVID. COVID, everybody retreated to their homes. We saw each other in boxes in 2 dimensions. Anybody who was new to the university, from 2020 forward, hadn't been in rooms with all these people who were doing the good and hard work of the university, and we needed to be reminded that we like each other, and we needed to be reminded that we have a shared mission at this university, and that is UIC's superpower, by the way. So our mission, UIC's mission, is to provide the broadest access to the highest levels of educational, research, and clinical excellence. So we're all about access and excellence, and have shown that you can make the two things happen at the same time. So we're 56% Pell Grant recipients, and we have a $500 million research portfolio. So we're making both of those things happen, and people here like our mission. They resonate with our mission. They believe in our mission. In fact, when we just went through reaccreditation, in the exit interview, one of the things that they said in the write-up that they sent us was the extent to which the mission is held across the university is kind of extraordinary. So my job was to kind of remind people of that. To me, that was the greatest asset at my disposal as a leader here, that we had a shared mission, that people, felt deeply in their brains, but also deeply in their hearts, and appeal to that and provide opportunities for people to come together. So we did, shortly after I arrived here, we did ice cream socials. It's silly, right? And at the ice cream socials, we had all the leaders of the university scooping the ice cream. So we were literally serving all of the faculty, staff, and students who were here at the university. And then we're about to do hot chocolate socials. We did those last year also. And again, we're literally serving all the people of the university. But then we also do these things called Spark Talks, which are 3-minute talks by faculty talking about their work. It can be about their teaching, it can be about community engagement, it can be about research, but they're 3-minute talks, and we do 18 of them in an hour, right? Because it is literally 3 minutes, just like that, right? And people realize, oh, I'm interested in this work that this person who I've never met before in a totally different college on the far end of campus is doing. Maybe I should set up time to have coffee with them, et cetera. So I think there was a lot of community building that needed to be done to bring people, fully back to campus. I don't think that work is completed yet, but we certainly are much further along than when I first arrived here. And Doug, you probably have no knowledge of this, and there's no reason for you to know, but during COVID, my daughter and I, my youngest child and I, we wrote an essay together for Inside Higher Education about the community that higher education builds for its faculty, staff, and students, and the importance of that community to help our university community and the world to navigate this, to navigate the pandemic. So I've been thinking about this idea of the importance of community And when a pandemic makes it much more difficult to leverage the tools of community because of, infectious disease, how do you maintain it? And then when we are coming out of the pandemic, how do we rebuild that community? So so first of all, I'm really grateful that y'all were interested in that essay, and it was a ton of fun to write that. At the time, my youngest child was a freshman in college, and it had that kind of leader, new college student, both perspectives were brought to it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, by the way.
No, I appreciate that, and I actually love pieces that sort of blend perspectives. I'd love to hear what that experience was like of writing with your daughter another time probably, but that's really cool. Thinking about your sort of arc, I'll ask in a second. We'll ask in a second about the flip side of this, but what would you consider to be so far the thing you're most proud of as a leader, or your greatest accomplishment? I mean, the flip side we're going to ask about is sort of one of what's been most challenging to you, and something that you feel like really tested you. But I'm curious on the first one, like where you feel like you've had, something that's either a particular thing that had impact or something that surprised you about sort of that you didn't expect to be an accomplishment that ended up being so.
Yeah. So before I became an academic leader, and even yet today, I'm a researcher in children's environmental health, and we did a lot of work on childhood lead exposure. And along with other really good people doing work on childhood lead exposure, at other universities, our work was instrumental in getting the reference level, like the blood lead level that should concern parents, lowered, because there's no physiological use for lead in the human body, and it became clear that even very, very low levels of lead exposure were harmful. And our research group was part of making some of those discoveries. There were other research groups. I don't want to claim ownership of this. This was really a collective enterprise. What I tell my research team all the time is that, they can feel pride in that there are hundreds of thousands of children in the United States who are safer because of the good work that they did. And I have an amazing research team, and I feel so much pride in that. So that's on the research side. On the, being an academic leader side, I was at Rice in Houston when Hurricane Harvey hit. And our president was out of the country. I was the number 2. And I mean, you just never seen anything like Hurricane Harvey. It was walls of water falling out of the sky. I've never seen anything like it. We got a total of about 50 inches of rain. The roads were flooded, and we had this community. And we immediately, one of the first things I did in my leadership role is say, we have to stand up a tool right now to figure out if everybody in our community is okay. So we had a way of getting to all of the students on campus. That was easy through the dormitories, but we stood up these IT-based tools to get the answer to 7 questions in, and you could do it on your phone, you could do it on a laptop, and about, do you have a safe place to stay? Do you have power? Do you have clean water? Just 7 very basic human needs questions, and we wanted that answered for everyone. And so we stood up that tool, we got the information in, and it was clear that for a lot of our hourly workers who didn't check their email in the same way that, probably the 3 of us do so far more often than is healthy for us, that we had to have a mechanism for reaching them. So we stood up immediately a phone bank where we called the emergency number for all the people who had not responded over the internet, and we made sure that we had multiple people who were bilingual to staff the phone banks, because we had a lot of bilingual hourly workers. So pretty quickly we had a summary sense of what was going on for everybody in our community. And from that, we were able to design the interventions that people in our community needed. So number one, there were, for people who couldn't move back into their houses, we set up a matching system with people who had room in their houses. Like, can you take on someone who's, lost their home in one of your spare rooms, etc. So even though any number of people lost their housing in Hurricane Harvey, not a single person in our community spent a single night in a shelter or emergency shelter or anything like that. They were all kind of brought in to the community. That was very cool. We set up carpooling for people who had lost their vehicles in the flood. We set up some kind of emergency approaches to childcare for people whose childcare centers or the schools were closed for all of the schools were closed for 3 weeks, so we needed to get that taken care of. And then we also knew who had damaged homes, and we set up these volunteer student crews to go out and help people with the and staff people. I went out on these crews myself. That's another thing about leadership. Never ever ask people to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. So went out on these crews to help people in their homes, etc. And that was the sort of, how do we take care of the people in this immediate community that is Rice University? And then the next step after that was, we have students who are and faculty and staff, but especially our students, who were eager to be helpful to the larger Houston community. And we set up a volunteer matching system. Again, IT-based, that data science stuff, it comes in handy. Set up this volunteer matching system to get our students out helping people all over the city of Houston with whatever they might need, whether it's a food bank or clothing bank or, Red Cross, blood donation center, whatever the case might be. So that was, professionally, that, of course, getting Notre Dame through COVID, keeping the academics going through COVID. I could do a long story about that as well, but I've never seen anything like Hurricane Harvey, and I worry a lot in the face of global climate change about the number of communities who are going to face situations like that, because it is not for the faint of heart. It was so hard on so many people.
Those are fantastic examples, and so different, which is that's really great in terms of stories. And I think right now, especially, we're and I think people are preparing for yet another hurricane, that higher ed leaders are needing to develop expertise and skills in this area of how to do emergency response in this way rapidly. So I think hearing that story will be very helpful.
Can I say one thing about emergency response? People, after the whole Hurricane Harvey thing and COVID and everything that's happened this past year, people oftentimes ask me, what's the first thing that you do when an emergency arises? And I always tell people, the first thing you do when an emergency arises is stop, take a deep breath, and remember what your values are, your personal values and your institutional values, and get yourself centered around that, and then start thinking about how you're going to deal with the emergency. You got to do that pretty quickly, but nevertheless, first think about your values and then start figuring out what you're going to do in that emergency.
That's great. Good advice. So on the topic of advice, we're now at the rapid fire final minute of our show. And so it's very quick. What has been the best advice that you received from someone else that has helped you in your leadership journey? Is there a piece of advice that you most frequently revisit that has been most powerful, and who gave it?
When Nan Cohen was the president of Duke University, she told me the busier she got, the more adamant she was about her physical fitness routine. And I agree with her. It has really helped me all these years.
That's great. We also want to know, so I'm sure other aspiring leaders come up to you and are curious, and people who are earlier in their career want advice from you. What is the most consistent advice you give, other than that, to folks who are aspiring leaders? Is there anything that you find yourself most frequently sharing?
You know, it's less common for me to share advice in those situations, and more common for me to ask people questions about, well, why are you interested in a leadership role? What do you want to be able to accomplish by having that? What parts of it do you feel better prepared for or less prepared for? So in those situations, I'm more likely to ask people questions and help them work their way through things, rather than give some piece of advice. Although I do regularly tell people, the busier you get, the more important it is to hew to your physical fitness routine, whatever that might be: walking, running, biking, running, walking with your dog, whatever it is, walking around your farm and taking care of your bees, all the different things you do to keep yourself, physically ready for the challenges the world brings. I do that.
That's great. Doug, you want to bring it home?
Sure. We usually ask for somebody to offer a leadership book, or if it's not a book about leadership, a book that has influenced your leadership? Is there a particular, and we've had lots of different kinds of answers to this, but curious, sort of what if there's something that most has guided or influenced how you think about leading?
I told you I really love to read, so, asking me to pick my favorite book is like asking me to pick my favorite child. I love them all so much. But there is a book that I have people read a lot. It's this book by John Doerr called Measure What Matters. And it's all about this idea of, you have to know what your overall central objective is, and then you need to know what your key goals are, and under each of those goals, what are some metrics that you're going to hold yourself accountable against, and what are milestones for getting to those metrics. Because I think it's really, in these jobs, it's important to be able to have the big vision of, here's where we want to be 10 years from now. But you also have to have the ability to say, if we want to be there 10 years from now, where do we need to be a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, to have that sense, and having some structure around that process of making significant progress against a big goal, I think is pretty helpful. But I could reel off a bunch of books, including novels, that I've read that have shaped my thinking. So
that's a great one to recommend. My to yes and on that, my hot tip is go into ChatGPT and ask it to read and summarize Measuring What Matters, and then take the goals of your organization and your org chart and ask ChatGPT to generate KPIs based on the goals of your organization for everyone on your org chart, and it is brilliant. It is.
Oh, I like it.
You so much time because if it synthesizes the book, then it's a good way it's a good place to start. People don't set OKRs and KPIs aligned with where they want to go. And anyway, love that book.
Thank you. That's a really good tip. I'm going to do that, not this afternoon. I'm going to do that this weekend. That's a fantastic tip. Thank you, Bridget.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Chancellor Miranda. This has been really lovely. I feel like you made me look very good because everything I said about you has been shown to be quite true in this conversation. So I think folks are going to be quite delighted to hear from you and your perspective on leadership. Also, these are really fascinating stories that are just very helpful for people who are trying to learn and improve. So thank you so much for the time. Doug, as always, for being an excellent co-host. And for those of you at home, we hope this has been an inspiring content, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. You're so kind.